Yeah, so culture, they say, is I'm going to read the second definition there, the product of the individual and group values, attitudes, perception, competencies, and pattern of behavior that determine an organization, commitment, style, and ability to manage health and safety. Well, at least um, at least in this way, there is no need to learn the definition. But I guess what they're trying to say is that this is what I had in the formula here, that culture is made up of you, the individual, your values, your attitudes, your perception, and culture is also made up of the group or the company that you are working for. Like, what values do they hold towards health and safety? And we had said last week that in essence, the group is not really the company building, but is really the managers in that building anyway, right? So I'll try to leave that formula there. And we had looked at what could the individual do to contribute towards health and safety. And they had all of this. They had basically, if you had a good culture, you will have better motivated workers, fewer accidents. So we did all of this. And then we had what was called culture indicators. And I mentioned that this was very big for exam. Even though culture is something that is intangible, meaning that you cannot see culture, then culture is like a concept, right? But you can see the indicators of culture, which is why we had used this symbol here, right? Speed is something from physics, right? Speed is distance over time. Let me just admit some people there. Yeah, speed is distance over time, and you cannot really see the entity that is called speed, but you can measure speed still, right? I don't know if you know that. Speed is energy then, right? Meters per second and stuff, but you can still measure that energy. And that is like what culture is. Culture is like your values, and right? Values is something that is intangible, but at the same time, you can still measure culture. So we had said if a company had any one of these here being high, the company would have had a negative safety culture. And if they had these as being low, for example, a low absenteeism rate, I guess happy workers then, right? Workers that don't complain, then you may have had a positive safety culture in that company, right? This slide here would have mentioned what are some things managers can do to show, I guess, positive safety culture. So these are some things, I guess, are indicators of management culture or a positive safety culture, in that they promote health and safety leadership. They put health and safety as part of the organization's plan. And again, these are really things, if you think about them, you can see it, for example, like in a meeting where on the agenda, they have safety on the agenda. It's not just something that they sort of talk about in the first 2 minutes, but it's like an agenda item. Then they have health and safety, like what is happening in the company, as an agenda item. So we did all of this already, and I'm not going to explain all of that again. I think there's just the idea that you can measure culture, and you have indicators of culture. And if some things are, for example, good, like leaders taking part in meeting and holding persons accountable, even things like rewards and incentives, if they are giving their workers an incentive for being safe, that may be seen as a positive safety culture. We discussed the influence of peers, and I think this is simple. This is almost like social studies, if you want to call it that, that people do influence you. However, the idea here is that we would want the influence to be positive and not negative. But I mean, the thing is that you probably would know persons in companies who are a little bit dominating, and they're a little bit loud, and then they could influence workers who may be quieter, then to say that, that they would not, put on a particular PPE, or they may come to the meeting and sleep, and then they may be seen to be like the cool worker then, right? The worker that everybody wants to be like anyway. So this has a part that the peers can influence you to be both, I guess, positive, or in a positive way, or they could influence you in a negative way anyway. All right. But I think when it's written, it was written to be positive. This is how NEBOSH look at it. They look at it in the sense that your peers could influence you in a positive way. So, and this is how it is in most companies anyway. Most, I'm talking about a lot of the bigger companies, even in Trinidad, that they will tell you come to the meeting, they will have on their PPE, they will tell you, report accidents, incidents, right? So if you work for any one of those companies, some of you all do, I don't want to call any one of them here anyway, but you will know that there's a strong emphasis on safety. The only one I'll probably call is the one that I work for, which was Massey, and they take it very seriously, right? The offshore industry takes it very, very serious. You see, even if you came in there with the idea of just making money in the company, but by seeing how the rest of the workers treat safety, then that tends to rub off on you anyway. So I think this was self-explanatory that peers can influence you, hopefully in a positive way. And that's how it's written. I said that it is written from a NEBOSH perspective to be a positive influence. But I suppose if you look at the Trinidad culture, it may be taken to be negative as well. All right. We said this that managers are culture drivers. Basically, what the managers do, the workers will follow. And I know that's easier said than done. But again, if you're working, you have an idea what they're talking about. If the managers are not wearing PPE in the workshop, but they insist on the workers are wearing it, that may lead to like conflicting signals, right? If the speed limit says, 30 kilometers per hour, but the managers are, speeding out at breakneck speed out of the company, that may lead to mixed signals as well. So you have all of this here. Managers should practice what they preach. There are many ways to actually to give an example of it, and that is what I think you would need to do for exam. You don't need to put, I mean, if you put these overarching statements, you need to put an example with it, right? Managers should practice what they preach. So you have to put an example for that. And you could think of something as what I said, maybe they themselves wearing PPE, or something is more complicated. Maybe they taking part in an inspection. The managers actually hosting a safety meeting, right? For those of us in safety, we may think that may never happen, right? That you'd never have your CEO hosting a meeting, right? Normally, the process of having a meeting on a Monday morning is the job of the safety, right? But think about maybe what a difference it would make if on a given morning the CEO shows up and hosts the meeting instead of you, right? This is something I actually did at Massey anyway. So it sends a different message then, as opposed to, having the safety fight all the time to get the message across. If the managers, the CEO shows up and says the same thing as the safety, it's the same thing that they are saying, that PP must be worn and JSAs must be followed and you must smoke in the designated area, etc. But if the CEO says it, it sends a different message anyway. So there are many ways you can flesh this out. I'll leave that up there to you because you can think of your own examples of it anyway. And the truth is how this exam is, as I mentioned to you all, and some of you all may have seen some of the questions that you did already for me. There's normally a case study and the answers are going to be from the case study, right? If they had said, what would be the negative indicators of a safety culture, and you decide to look back at this slide and put a negative indicator was that managers would not taking safety seriously, there'll be an example in the passage then of the case study. There'll be somewhere where it would have been said that workers are complaining, but their complaints are being ignored by managers. So it's even better with this sort of case study we have tested, that the examples are really from the passage itself, and they would want you to take it from the passage itself. So we have gotten back to where we left off last week anyway. And just before we go into that, I was telling you that there was a concept here, and the concept was that maybe if I can have you look at the formula here. Anyway, at least without the writing on it, the concept going forward was that that there is a disconnect between the individual and the group, right? So there is a difference in values then between the individual and the group. But the concept going forward was that the difference was actually only part of the individual, right? And the idea here was that if it was the individual that was not fully convinced that safety was important, they were saying that the managers can do some things to influence the person, and that is what we have here on page 9. So if you want to, let's take a look at that. Back on page 9, right? Well, you'll see the same thing I have on this slide. You'll see competence, and right on page 9 there you have competent workers. But as I was saying, there is the concept here that if the individual maybe wasn't fully convinced that safety was important, the concept going forward is that yes, the subheading in the book is changing, but of course remember the subheading is still part of the overall heading, which is improving health and safety culture on page 9. So what they were saying there was that the managers now that they can come and try to, I'll use the phrase talk to, but of course this really means influence. The managers can come and try to talk to the workers and try to change their perception then about safety. And they were saying there were 3 ways that can be done. And of course, if you have your books, you'd have already seen one there, which is verbal communication. So let me take it from right here. So 3 main types of communications are used within the organization. These are verbal, written, and graphic. Communication here, I guess, is defined as the process by which information is exchanged between a sender and a receiver to gain the feedback before a decision is made, right? So you can think about that and think about maybe if you have been communicated to in your workplace, or have there been just talk then? Have there been just talk and then what was said was not taken into consideration, right? Because the definition of, I guess, effective communication is that the feedback have to be taken before a decision is made, right? Again, I said think about it. I didn't say learn it because remember again, this way of testing now is not about definitions anymore, right? So if we can go straight into the NEBOSH aspect of it, I'm gonna try to get the slides and you'll have to turn the page to page 10. Slides didn't move, right? So the concept here I was saying is that I'm not too sure why the slides are right. It said move there, right? So the concept going now is that so in the terms of the managers talking to you, you know, like what can go wrong with that, right? Like what could be a reason then for that means of changing your perception? What could be wrong with that? And if you look at your book on page 10, you're going to see some benefits and some limitations of verbal communication. Well, again, remember it is open book. So if they would ask you what are the limitations, and they don't really come out, remember it is a case study. They may have like in the case study where the supervisor was instructing the worker, and then they would say the worker did not follow instructions, and then they may say, well, identify or what is 10 reasons why the workers may not have understood the verbal instruction, right? So I'm going to stick to this slide a bit, and I'm just going to touch the top of page 10. So I'm going to go back to this slide because a lot of the answers are there. Verbal communication is the most common. It is communication by speech or word of mouth. And this would be the limitations, of course, right? Barriers to verbal communication can include, sorry, they have to admit someone. Yeah, barriers to verbal communication can include language and dialect. So this would be a difference in language or dialect. The use of technical language and abbreviation, background noise, distractions, hearing problems, and can you think of any others? Now, again, this is something I would ask in class. For the sake of time, we're going to have it in your book. So let's just look at it in your book anyway. Some of the limitations or the barriers to verbal communication. So maybe some that we have not said before, right? So if you could, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe the 5th point on page 10. Recipient may have poor hearing. Message may be ambiguous, meaning it's not clear as to what it is you're asking us to do in the JSA or the risk assessment. Recipient may miss information, and there's a lot of reasons for that. If it's verbal, if it was, let's say, a face-to-face meeting and it's a huge meeting, the person at the back of the meeting may not fully hear what was being said in front of the meeting. if they would know, for example, the electronic mediums then, like a mic or whatever have you, right? Recipient may forget the message. There's no written record as proof because it's verbal. Poor transmission quality if by telephone or PA system, right? So again, that may be a lack of a PA system, right? So again, I'm not going to stick here. Again, I told you last week and the week before, because I do go back and sometimes listen to these videos, that the mode of examination has changed, right? And like before, again, how we would teach this is ask the students to come up, which is what you're seeing here. Can you think of any other? And they will come up with it. Like what would be some further barriers to verbal communication. And then you had to remember those. The exam is way much more easier now. It's open book. Um, you can go to Google, and please don't ignore that. Google is a good source of information. If your question is, what are some barriers why the worker did not understand, you can just go to Google and say, what are the barriers to verbal communication? And it would list, I mean, this is definitely more than 10. I don't think you'll ever get this more than 10 marks, but that's how easy it is, right? So I don't, even though I know it have more, and you probably can think of some more why a worker would not understand. Like to me, if you want, I can give you one. I didn't see it there, but I'm doing this one to demonstrate to you that there is more answers than the textbook then, right? And you can think about these for yourself, which is how we used to teach anyway, when you had to create them and write them for exam. But now it's just a matter of looking back. Like a really good one that is not there is for example, if the worker was fatigued or tired, and this is something you find a lot of workers who work shift, right? If you had the night shift, 12-hour shift, and then you had to do a handover. Normally, handover is a meeting. I know Jerusalem will know what I'm talking about. So it's a meeting you have to be in, but you may have been doing a 12 hours for, I don't want to say the real figure here, but maybe a 12 hours for the last 5 days. And I mean, you're not feeling well. So yes, in the meeting, but then you may be more on the sleepy side. So a good, and we have seen that those of us who work in the companies, you know what I'm talking about, that workers will be in the meeting, but they're not fully aware then of everything that is going on around them. So I didn't want to tell you that you don't have to cram these things. I mean, it is an open book exam, number one. And number two, if you were good at coming up with them for yourself, better yet, right? But folks, the slides is there. I would advise, coming closer to exam, that you print these slides, you have them in your hand. A lot of the students basically, probably more than 95% of the students, we had a huge exam in October, and about 95% of the students said the answers were all on the slides, right? When we did something called the closing interview, which is something you have to do at the end of the exam, as to where you source the information from. A lot of them actually did not say the internet. A lot of them did not say Google. Most of them said the textbooks and the slides, right? Anyways, I'm moving on. I don't want to spend too long there, but all you have to do is mark the page with your highlighter to know that there is something important there on verbal communication. So let's move on to written, unless if you have any questions or comments. If not, I'm moving on to written. So remember the concept, folks, the concept. So it goes on here, right? I think this is some ways this is some means of communicating verbally. So verbal could be face-to-face. It could be in a toolbox meeting or a team briefing meeting. It could be something called a safety circles or discussion groups. All of these are just really team meetings that have different tag names, I guess, other than face-to-face or one-on-one. But all of these safety circles, discussion groups, right? Toolbox talks are all different types of safety meetings, and in which verbal communication could be disseminated then, right? So let's go to written. So remember this was a past question. Of course, this was in the old days. Explain why it is important to use a variety of methods to communicate health and safety information in the workplace. I would not give you this. Again, this you can say that this is a question that was spilled over from, December 2019, right? Remember the way of examining only changed August this year. So I would not give you that. That is one of the older version of a question. So written communication, if you look back at your books now, page 10. So let me just again say, remember that the subtopics are changing, but the concept is still the same, which is this is just a means of changing a worker's perception who may not have fully believed that safety was important. So one way of changing their perception about safety would have been to talk to them. Another way is to give them written information. Now, in terms of written, you would observe a bit of a twist, right? The twist is here. In terms of written, now you'll see it in your book and you'll see it on my first slide, the first point here. In terms of written, the syllabus didn't cover all the written forms of communication. It basically covered about two. It covered what is called the notice board, which is why the heading here is written communication, but you see notice board in bracket. I'm just admitting someone there, which is why I paused, right? And another form that they covered here was memos, right? Email was not covered too much in the syllabus. So if you look at the book, I'm just gonna read a line from your book. They have their written communication uses the written word, for example, a report, memo, email, notice, right? So you see the notices there, company handbook, policy, document, operating instructions, risk assessment, minutes of meetings. I'm sure you can think of anything as that is written. The truth is, all procedures are written. A JSA is written, a permit to work is written, right? So I don't quite see that as a question, and it wasn't really a question here. That was just the forms of written communication. However, though, as I mentioned to you, they went on to sort of dwell on the notice board. Again, this is just your syllabus, right? So I'm going to stick to that. So here we have, most common is the notice board. I'm back to the slides now. These must be well positioned, reviewed, and updated regularly to maintain its effectiveness. And a question, I guess one of the older questions coming out of that was identify 8 types or 8 items. This would be 8 items of information to be placed on a safety notice board. Again, none of these I am giving you today. These are things you can just think about. And I believe I have the answer for that one actually on the slide, right? So yeah, I mean, there's no need to give you this because it's already done. This will be 8 items to put on a safety notice board. When I read them, please remember that possibly in Trinidad, this is not done. I think in Trinidad, what you normally would find, well, that's not really true too, but sometimes you find in some notice board, you find like, for example, things that are not, the safety notice board, this says that they may not be really safety items then, right? But this slide is written to say, what are the safety items then to be placed on a safety notice board? So please, if you have a highlighter or whatever, you could just, if you have this printed or just maybe take a note of that, that this is not the normal notice board, right? In short, I'm trying to say then that a lot of companies may not have a safety notice board. What they have is a notice board. But the twist to this slide and the twist to this syllabus is that they are specifying a safety notice board, not the main notice board out in front, but a notice board. And so then the things to go on it will just be safety things. And this is what I have here. As I said, it's not, it is a question, but the answers are here. So please know I am not giving you this for any assignment because the answers are here. To give you this then would mean I'm giving you dictation. You are simply going to write over what you have on the slide. So do not do this for homework. I would be sending you a question. I know I promised one last week, but I still didn't feel as if we had covered enough work. So I know Jerusalem had asked and a couple of you all asked for the question, but as we had just started culture last week and I felt that we didn't finish enough to send a good question still. All right, but I will be sending one, if not today, this afternoon, Monday, right? Because I have the question, just looking at it, there were some things that we didn't cover as yet. For example, what we're looking at here, verbal, written, and graphic, right? Anyway, back to the answer here. What are 8 items to be placed on a notice board? In the UK, they have something called the health and safety poster. Now, again, for Trinidadians, we may think of this as Bristol board. This is not Bristol board they are talking about. This is a government poster that they have to show on the safety notice board. your new textbook. Again, I do not honestly like this book. I mean, folks who were with me before and you know the book from before, but that's how it is, right? The syllabus has been reduced, right, to cope with the pandemic and whatever have you. But the reason why I say that is that there was a picture of the poster right there in your book, right? So I didn't have to explain it too much then. But please know that this is not a poster that someone can draw up at home on a Bristol board. This is a government HSE poster that is a legal requirement for it to go on the safety notice board. If you want, you can just check it up exactly that quick on Google. You can just put UK HSE poster and you would see it. Again, the picture and stuff is no longer in the book, right? Anyway, another thing to put on the safety notice board, first aid arrangements, details about HSE targets and actual performance against them. We call these KPIs, which is your fourth session. The KPI, for those of us who work in, you know what that is. It's just like a spreadsheet table that is put on the notice board to tell you what is happening from 1 month to another month in terms of accidents, incidents, property damages, training, etc. Right? Well, I have the health and safety poster again, so this could have been an error on my part here. But again, it may be to tell it was that. In fact, I think the idea I had it was one of it was the government poster, and another one could have just been like a guidance, maybe from BP or Shell. Maybe they had a poster, maybe like a poster with Homer Simpson. So the idea I had here was one was government and one was just maybe an industry poster or something about wearing hard hats or something, right? The importance of wearing hard hats. So you could just make a distinction there, right? As to what I had in mind, right? The minutes of the last committee meetings, if it's probably short enough, it could be, I guess, photocopied and, tacked onto the safety notice board. Emergency evacuation numbers and the persons with responsibility, like the first aiders. Of course, I had that on top already, but you can probably think of these now as the fire marshals. And those of us who know a lot about evacuation, there'll be somebody called the incident commander. The incident commander is someone that will take charge in the event of an emergency. And the incident commander does not have to be the safety, right? It could just be someone that had experience in that field of work then. Maybe if the person was a past soldier, a past military person, maybe they can be a good commander in the terms of an emergency, right? Copies of employers' liability insurance certificates, all of those things will go on the safety notice board, right? So, so I think that is a bit sidetracking from the culture topic, and the culture topic would have really been what would have been the disadvantages, right? The limitations of using written communication, and you would see them in your book. Of course, we have the benefits and the limitations of using written communication. So let's take I'll read off some of them from your book. The benefits of using written communication is that there is a permanent record. It can be referred back to, I guess that is why it is a permanent record. Can be written very carefully to avoid the use of jargons, abbreviations, and ambiguities, which is, uncertainty in the message. Can be distributed to a wide audience relatively cheaply if it's just, I guess, like a handout or a poster, right? So those are the benefits. I would not read all the limitation. Again, like I said, this is the piece of the class that I don't like. Again, these are ways I would normally get answers out of the students, right? So some of the limitations of written communication. I'm just going to stick to this slide because it's that easy, right? It could be indirect. It takes time to write. It may contain jargon and abbreviation. It can be impersonal. The message may be ambiguous after all, meaning that it's written, not clear. Message may be not read by the recipient. Language barriers may exist. Recipients may not be able to read. Immediate feedback is not available. So I guess I almost read all there, right? So, I mean, it is open book, folks. It can't get easier than that, right? I think last week I was saying, in terms of Homer Simpson, in fact, if you have your pencil, I would probably shout about three more. limitations. I know I'd said Homer Simpson last week. For those who were not here, Homer Simpson is the spokesperson. He is the official mascot for health and safety worldwide. Trying to find a picture of him. These are where these pictures come from, right? So these pictures should prove that point to you, right? If you look at just Google images on safety mascots, you'll see Homer Simpson there. Anyway, I was saying maybe, I mean, and he is like a poster there, isn't he, right? I mean, this is like a poster. So I'll give you 3 extra ones. Hopefully I don't forget them by the time I finish this one, right? So I think a limitation of using like a mascot like Homer Simpson, maybe it may be misleading in that the wrong message may be sent, right? And this is written communication. This is posters we're talking about here. This is not the HSE poster, so I guess this could be one of those posters I had in mind, right? So the wrong message could be sent and you may have to explain that. So what I have in mind is that yes, Homer here is talking about report it, don't ignore it, explain exactly what happened in terms of an accident. What I'm trying to say is by using Homer Simpson, right? The imagery that comes up may be someone that says, that they have not seen The Simpsons in a long time, or they remember something about Bart Simpson that was pretty funny. And then all they get from that is, when I get home this evening, I would want to go and look at some episodes of The Simpsons. So that's what I'm saying, that by using him, every time they look at the poster then, right? They will say, oh, I didn't get to I don't know if people still buy DVDs and stuff, but I know it's just on YouTube anyway. But, they may see a season of The Simpsons and then they may say that they want to have a look at that, right? So the wrong message is sent then that, yes, he's talking about accidents and reporting it, but what they get from it is, okay, maybe a fond memory of when they were younger and they looked at The Simpsons and, they saw their craziness that Homer did anyway, right? So that is what I mean by a limitation. They have used it. I mentioned it last week to you and I said, think about it and using him. He may be eye-catching. It may be, good to use him, but at the same time, the wrong imagery or the wrong feeling then may be conjured up and that the person may just remember to look at a couple episodes of The Simpsons, especially when Simpsons have had a reputation of predicting so much of the things of the world events, like with Donald Trump and stuff like that. So, people may get the wrong message, right? They will say, okay, Simpsons working for the Illuminati, things like that. You get the wrong message, and that wasn't what the safety poster was meant for. It's meant to say that, report the accidents, right? So that's what I'm saying, that he is that mascot, but to me, by putting him, you may get the wrong message coming out of it, right? Anyway, I said I'd give you 3. That was just one, being that the wrong message or feeling or, the take home from that message may be the wrong message. Another one here that I thought is a good one is that seeing that we are talking about written communication can be easily defaced then. So this is a limitation. Written communication can be easily defaced or spoiled by the weather as in terms of sun, rain, and snow. So think about this. Remember, it is the syllabus that took the note or took the slant of talking about the notice board. So what if the items in the notice board got wet? Rain, as they say, rain fell the wrong way then, right? It fell the opposite way. And the board normally don't get wet, but the rain fell the other way, freak storm or whatever have you. And all the items in it has been defaced, right? So it could be defaced by the weather, but it could also be defaced by persons, right? If you were to put a written instruction there, as how they mentioned here, right? They mentioned things that are KPIs and somebody come and tamper with it, right? Maybe you had a one represents the number of first aid and then somebody comes and add a 0 next to it. So it looks as if you have 10 first aid cases there. So these things could be tampered with if it is written instructions. Again, I'm doing this to demonstrate to you all that there are more answers than what you find in the book, right? And let me give you another one. Now, these answers are already from NEBOSH. These answers are from past paper questions. So the fact about the message being lost by using the mascot of Homer Simpson is an answer from NEBOSH. The facing is one, and they had another one. I don't know if, let me just say this one and see if I get this one. Another one is that the message may be, or the information may be inaccurate, right? So what was presented there was never researched. The information that's presented on the poster was never researched, right? So I can give you a lot of examples, right? But you can think of some, right? Someone saying then to use a halon fire extinguisher. There's a poster with a halon extinguisher, but halon extinguishers have been banned worldwide. These are things I see in companies then, right? When I go, consulting, I have seen one and I show the person who, the company here, the person is actually in the class this morning, right? So I wouldn't say the company name, but I saw one in a company where the signs were wrong, right? The signs were the wrong shape and color, right? But it's well displayed, but the thing is it has wrong shape and color, right? Shapes and colors of sign would change in 2015. But I guess some local companies didn't know. Some say that could be a limitation, that the information may be inaccurate, right? And so the information before it's presented, it needs to be fully researched. Anyway, so that's three more. I'm sure if you put your mind to it, you could think of some others, but however, that is about 10, isn't it? Yeah, the book has 10 and I now give it three, so that's three more, right? And if you put your minds to it, and even not your minds, if you put Google to it, on the day of the exam, you'll more than come up with 10. And the book has 10, so I don't see why you can't come up with the 10, right? So the last one is graphic communication. This one, of course, is like what we're using today, like Zoom, right? Of course, it could actually include, for those of us, this is probably the most effective medium before Zoom would have been the projector, right? So the projector, Skype, for those who remember Skype, right? Skype seems to be on the losing end right now, right? But yeah, so those are means of graphic communication. So let me stick to the slide. So they have here, this is communication by means of drawings, photographs, videos, films, company intranet, and devices that utilize some means of electronic or digital media. The advantage is that they can be used to attract and retain the attention of the participants, so that is true. Videos, if you show a good safety video that has nice sound in it and a nice quality, persons would pay attention to it, right? It can also be readily updated. Hopefully it is updated to ensure that the information disseminated is relevant and simple. So these are the advantages of graphic. And of course, I think if you just think about Zoom, you know the disadvantages of graphic, right? So they have here too much reliance on the electronic medium as opposed to face-to-face communication may result in the loss of a personal touch, right? I think Zoom does allow for some aspect of, feedback. Of course, you have to use the feedback as well. But some disadvantages or more common ones would be power failure, right? The loss of the internet, intranet. A couple of students called me this morning, set up in their parts, didn't have power this morning, right? Unable to see message due to fine print. Now, just to explain that one here, this third point was more written for the projector. Like if again, you're in a big meeting, and I say big here because that's what I was accustomed to, like a huge meeting in Massey, 100 persons in a meeting room, a big meeting room, of course, right? And this was probably more than 100, but the projector is in front, and yet it's probably bright and stuff in front, but the folks at the back, they print there, the size of the font they use on the PowerPoint. Of course, we had that same problem in class as well, but Zoom does allow us to share this with you all in a nice way without a projector. But that's it. I guess that's the point, that if it wasn't a projector, the folks at the back may not be able to see the fine print. It may not really be fine, but I suppose you couple that with distance from the projector, right? It does look as if the print is fine, right? Poor positioning of the electronic medium, such as a projector, leading to disability glare, right? So let's check the book a bit, see if we have any new ones there. Page 11 of chapter 3. Some, I'm just going to go to the limitations, right? The reason, of course, benefits are there, I guess. Let me just touch benefits as well, which you already did, right? Maybe eye-catching, visual, quick to interpret, no language barriers, jargon-free, convey a message to a wide audience. Of course, jargon-free could just be a music video then. It's just like a vehicle that is driving. The worker tried to apply the brakes did not pull, and the driver, I mean, God forbid, went off the road, right? There's no need for voice over there. It's just visual, jargon free, and everybody would still understand it, right? Anyway, limitations can only convey simple messages, might be expensive to buy or produce. Used to be, I guess, right? Again, this is like an old safety point. Safety videos used to be very expensive, right? I think some of the folks, like I said, I do have company people here. I don't know if anybody was that old to remember. There was a safety video about 10 years ago. I'm sorry to put it, I guess the new people to sleep. But about 10 years ago, there was a video called Remember Charlie, right? It was one of the most, it's still on YouTube, by the way. Versions of it is on YouTube. But the price of that, the companies had to pay for it was about 3,000 TT plus. So that was a kind of expensive video, but the companies, it was like a drive in Trinidad. The companies bought it, BP and Shell and all those companies bought it, and they really did pay for all their workers to see it, pay for them to see it because they had to now send their workers to like conference rooms and centers to view the video. But it was sort of a good video. If you want to get us write the name down, if anybody remember what I'm talking about, Remember Charlie was the name of the video. Pieces of it is on YouTube still. But that's the point. I do believe in today's day and age, anybody can make a video now. There's so much of apps anyway that anybody can just pay like $1 US and they can make a safety video now anyway, right? So anyway, back to the limitations. Symbols or pictograms may be unknown to the recipient. No immediate feedback available. Questions cannot be asked. Recipient may have impaired vision, right? So you get the idea. I don't think these things are difficult. Again, when all the answers are in your book and it's on the slide, right? So that brings us to the end of, I would ask you all now as a kind of just trying to wrap up this little piece here to see if you have any questions on verbal written graphic. I want to go for about 15 minutes again, and then I'll close today's session. But I did mention if you came on today early that I'll be starting, well, something else, right? And it's right here in your book. Well, I did the notice board and posters already. So if you look at page 11, you're going to see that there. I actually covered those already, the notice board and posters. So I'm going to go on to cooperation and consultation. More so page 12, which is consultation with the employees, right? But see if you have any questions. Let me just pause a minute there if you have any questions. And those questions be on, did you understand verbal written graphic? And to be honest with you, the question is going to be, what are the benefits and limitations? And of course, it's open book, so it's right in your book there. Anybody have any questions on that? We will just get a start to this one, as I mentioned to you, but we would not be able to finish. Consultation is a bit big, but it's actually already, again, if you came in, there's already a video on next week's session on YouTube. It is actually called the same thing, consultation with employees, which is the same thing on page 13 there now, but we're not going to reach that far, I guess, today. So first of all, do we have any questions on verbal written graphic? Anyone? Okay, right. So good. I mean, if you have any, just put your hand up, say it, right?
So I have a question.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So an email on the company's internet is considered to be graphic because it's electronic.
I think how they said it was written, didn't they? They had it as written. Yeah. Well, you could probably leave it as written, right? I'll stick to what you have on the syllabus, right? That is not. It's a good thing to know, but I don't think it's really a question here anyway, though, right? But the class it as written. So that's where I would leave it as well, right? I wouldn't say
Thank you.
otherwise. And I guess in the local context, I'll stick to what we see in there anyway. All right. So if thanks for the question there, it does give me a chance to have a bit of interaction, right? Like I said, these classes are pretty weird. Nibosh sent me a survey this week here in terms of like feedback and what's happening in Trinidad. And the long story short of it, they asked about, do we think that the classes will remain on Zoom in 2021? And definitely for you all, it would be, because remember, you all should be leaving us by February, March anyway. If anybody have an interest in doing the degree, well, they could let me know, or even the NEBOSH process safety should start next year as well. But I did say yes to that the classes would remain on Zoom, but they also asked, like, would it continue? And my answer to that was no. I don't know if you all know that the US on the 10th of December, I think it is, they're going to start some vaccination trials, not trials, sorry, they're distributing the vaccine in Florida from the 10th of December. And I guess we would probably follow through by April, March next year. So if classes remain on Zoom, I don't think so. I think if people have an option to come back to face-to-face classes, I think they will come back. I don't know if someone is trying to add someone there. No, right. Yeah, I don't know if students would remain on the Zoom classes then, right? So this is the question that they were asking. And my answer to them was no. I think they were trying to sort out because, I'm not too sure if this exam will stay the way it is. Remember the exam for people who know NEBOSH before. I do have some of you all here, like I said, who did this NEBOSH course before. The exam is really hard. You had 11 questions, and all of these things that we could afford to not learn by heart now, you had to learn it by heart, including chapter 1. So, I think the exam is very easy now, 50% easier than before. But if it remains that way, I would seriously doubt that anyway, right? Anyway, I just said that to tell like what NEBOSH is thinking behind the scenes. I am thinking that by next year, there will be mass vaccinations taking place. And probably by 2022, of course, you'll be long gone by that time in terms of the classes, that is, it will get back to normal life anyway. Anyway, next part of the course is, so I just want to just paint this picture again on page 13 now. Again, please remember on page 12, sorry, 12 and 13, that this is still culture, right? Please remember, you look at the top of your book, 3.2, the heading is still improving health and safety culture. So this is the principle now. The principle is again now that another way of improving the culture, of course, is verbal, written, graphic, but another way is to have consultation. So in a way, the consultation could fall under then verbal communication, right? So even though you're seeing this subheading changes, please know that the topic of culture remains, that this is still part of changing the company's culture. Let me just stick to the slides. The first thing you need to know from this slide, and again, when I say no, please remember this is not by memory, but just to know where to find it, is that consultation is a legal requirement. So you can look on page 13, you're going to see these same two laws there. So the aspect of talking to your workers then is not just something that is like a best practice in the UK, but it's a legal requirement. And there are two laws in the UK that talk about consultation. Well, you'll see another one in the books. Apparently there is three, right? Actually, no, my mistake. The safety representative and safety committee regulations. What I have here is the updated year. I have here 1997. Your book has 1977. It's the same law. Just look at it. Safety on page 13. Safety representative and safety committee regulations. Just the book cited the initial year. There's a need to keep up to speed though. So the updated year is 1997. And there's another law, the Health and Safety Consultation with Employee Regulations 1996. Again, like I said, these are now things to know in a smart way, but you don't have to remember them anymore. There used to be an acronym for this one. So if you see it in the slides, the acronym here was HSCER. Really, there was really no good way to pronounce that, right? But that was the acronym. right? There's really no good way of pronouncing that. If you look at the UK, they just say HSCER, right? So the Health and Safety Consultation with Employee Regulations. Students have come up with some strange way of pronouncing it over the years that I don't think I want to say here in class, right? I'll just stick with the acronym HSCER, right? The reason why I put that one down is because that one is actually, I wouldn't say more important, but the syllabus deals with that. So next week class is going to deal with that law. Right. Anyway, let me just move on. So the point to know in all of that was that consultation is a legal requirement. Whether or not you learn the law is not important. You can just open your book and find it, or go to Google and ask Google, what is the law for consultation in the UK, right? And you can get it. Anyway, consultation can allow for a more effective and efficient business with a better motivated staff. Remember, consultation is in a way verbal communication, right? Can reduce the number of accidents at and work-related ill health causes such as stress. I'm just moving on to the slide here. So cooperation and consultation with the workforce. Employers must consult their workers on a range of health and safety issues, such as any circumstances that may negatively affect, sorry, I have to admit somebody again. Right, so any circumstances that may negatively affect their health and safety, such as a change to a work procedure or process substance, change to existing risk levels, introduction to a new technology, any arrangements to use competent specialist persons. So I think what they're trying to say here is that you must talk to your workers, and they're just giving you some stuff to talk to the workers about. Like if the risk level change, you need to consult with your workers. If you bought a new piece of equipment, a new type of PP, you need to talk to your workers probably before that you had bought it even anyway. But this is what they were saying here. So these are some things to consult the workers about. And I think my answer to that was everything. You need to talk to them about everything, right? This slide here goes off a little bit in cooperation and consultation with contractors. Employers must consult with contractors on matters of the, again, I have to add someone, right? Right, so employers must consult with contractors on matters of health and safety, such as on-site safety rules and legal standards that the companies adhere to. But I think that's easy enough, right? If you have contractors, you must consult to them about what is your, like your smoking policy, your alcohol and drug policy, right? You must talk to them. Employers must consult contractors on supervision, such as the requirement for contractors to monitor their own subcontract workers anyway, right? So I think these are things you can get from this slide. Contractors, the employers must consult with those subcontractors, such as the main contractor. The main contractor is sometimes called the principal contractor. Does not use any subcontractors without the written agreement from the employer or organization. So I guess those of us who know about contract work, you know that a main contractor will get the, will actually get the job, and then they will tender it out to subcontractors. The point here is that they would want the main contractor just to inform the company about who is their subcontractors, right? So contractors, again, should have authorization to ensure that employees of the main contractor carries an authorization card while in the course of their job. But this is something from the UK. I think a version of that authorization card may be like our pre-passport we have in Trinidad and Tobago. But this may be something agreed upon that the contractor and the subcontractors agree upon, right? If they would want to have an authorization card. This is actually something low in the UK though. And the card is actually something called a working safely card, right? But we don't have that here in Trinidad. We use something called the plea passport, right? These are some rules that the contractor should follow. And again, this is what I guess the employer, if you look at the picture, the employer and the contractor should be consulting about it. What are some rules to follow? So typical rules contractors should follow include to inform the organization of any harmful substances brought into their premises, to observe any speed limit or speed restrictions while on the premises, to observe any PPE requirement while on the premises, to familiarize themselves and that of their employees with the emergency action to take, right? So I think that was, again, if you want to make up some, I can make up 100 different rules for contractors there, but I don't think you have to make them up because, again, what could I say? These are things you can just go to Google and find. Should you be asked, which I don't think you'll be asked, like 10 rules a contractor should follow, right? You can just make those things up. Must do a PPE, must do a permit to work, must have one PPE. And again, based on the nature of the exam, it's pretty much a research sort of exam over 24 hours. So there's no way I think that you'll could mess that up anyway, right? So if I could just go to this one concept before I close, I did say I'm gonna go till about 10:15. And this was on safety committees. Again, do not think that the topic has changed. You can now think of this. You're going to find this on page 16 of your textbook. There's just one little paragraph with it there. So I guess it'll fit in nicely for me to finish off in the next, how much minutes I have? Next 5 or 6 or 8 minutes, right? So you could think of this again as verbal communication that, consultation with the workforce is verbal. A safety committee then is like, if we go back to this slide, you'll actually see it under verbal, right? Let me go back a bit. You'll see that right here. Under verbal, you're going to see, this is verbal to the top. You see verbal to the top there. I think I went a bit too fast, right? And you see here safety committees. You see things, like toolbox meetings, safety circles, discussion group, right? So think of this still as a verbal communication. And let me just go straight to the slide with it. So safety committees must be established if 2 or more safety representative requests one in writing. The employer has 3 months to do so. Now, you may wonder, well, why? Why do they have to have it if 2 or more safety reps say to do it or have a safety committee? The answer is the law, the same law here. So it seems to have fell in the right place then. The Health and Safety Consultation with Employer Regulation 1996. This law is the law that specifies that if 2 or more safety representatives tell their company, I think we should have a safety committee meeting once a month, the employer have to do it if it's recommended by 2 or more safety persons then, right? So that law there, the HSCER law, is the law that actually says that. I'm trying to see if it's in your book, but it's right on the slide, right? I know sometimes, yes, it's right there in your book, page actually 16 have it. You'll see it right there, right? That safety committees, and they have the law there. Of course, I said we normally go with the more up-to-date law, the 1996 law, as opposed to the first version of that law there, right? The safety committee should have a broad spectrum of persons from the organization, can include one senior manager to demonstrate senior management commitment, must meet regularly, and action items must be completed within set timescales. Safety committees should have well-stated objectives, as this will drive the effectiveness of health and safety in the organization, can include a study of accidents and incident trends, the results of audits conducted, a review of any new legislation and how it can potentially affect the organization, reviewing risk assessments and the recommendations from the safety representative, feedback from employees, right? So if you wonder what is this slide all about, they're telling you what is the function of the committee, then like what the committee doing. Sometimes you find like a safety committee is formed, but they don't know what they're supposed to do. So this slide is telling you what the safety committee should be doing, right? The safety committee should have a clear objective for health and safety. A clear objective, I'm just going to rely on chapter 2 for this. A clear objective is that you say you want to reduce the accidents to 0. That's a clear objective. You say you want 10 persons trained in defensive driving. That's a clear objective. You say you want 10 persons trained in risk assessment. That's a clear objective. And what does the committee do? For those who know, the committee is a representative or a representation of the workforce. This is what they say here. One senior manager should actually be part of it. It should contain a broad spectrum of persons. Meaning, I'm just going to use my example, right? Meaning at Massey, I was in it, there was a director in it, but we had the receptionist in it. We had the custodian in it. We had the facilities manager in it. We had somebody from IT in it, right? So a broad spectrum of persons. And this is what they do. I mean, they're not going to just meet. They meet like 2 hours a month anyway, 1 day for the week. Well, 1 day for the month, sorry. So 1 day for the month, but about 2 hours would be that meeting. So what are they doing, right? Are they just meeting to get away from normal work? The answer is no. They should be analyzing accident trends. They should be talking about if there's any new laws coming up, reviewing risk assessments, looking at recommendations from safety reps or from OSHA, etc. Looking at what employees are saying, right? And sort of analyzing that and coming up with a way forward for the company. So that is the function of your safety committee there. I'm just trying to see what your book has in it, right? The book didn't really go into functions, did it? It more spoke about the composition. Page 16 just have the composition. Look at what your book has in it. Exactly what I said, a facilities manager, a training manager, right? The occupational person, occupational nurse in this case, if a company has that. But the book didn't go too much in function, so you can probably get it from this slide. Again, remember, Google is a good source of information for these things. If you were to ask the function of the committee, I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be on page 17, but yeah, it's there on page 17. Look at there to the bottom of page 17. You should highlight it, right? Remember, this is the idea of an open book exam. It's no longer to come up and to tax your brains with, to get the answer out of you, because it's an open book exam, but you have to know where the answers is then. Doesn't make sense if it's an open book, but you don't know where to open the book, right? So just if you have your marker or your highlighter, page 17, just highlight the word function there. You can get some from my slide, folks, but there is way much more in your book there. These things were really called PowerPoints for a reason, because it's meant to direct you to your textbook. So I'll read the first, the middle, and the last from page 17. The heading is actually the exact function of the safety committee. So somehow highlight that, because that is a good question. What is the function of the safety committee? In fact, again, I know I'm running out of time now, but remember, the thing is, they will give you a case study and they would say something like, is the committee working? And then somewhere in the case study, it may have that, you know, that accident reports would never analyze. They will have things like, there was no training conducted for the last 5 years. So then those are the things that give you an idea that, okay, this committee is not functioning, right? So I'm reading the first, the middle, and the last, right? The first, the function is studying accidents and ill health statistics. Well, we have that one. Somewhere in the middle, considering reports submitted by safety representatives. Actually, we have that one too. Last one, monitoring the effectiveness of safety communication, right? Maybe checking with the workers. Are you all being communicated to on time? Are you all receiving the emails? Have you all been attending the meetings, and looking at why people have not been attending the meetings, right? So folks, is right there. Let me just close up with this one slide here. So the one slide to close with is what factors would influence how effective a safety committee is or is not, right? So it's one thing to have it. So you have your committee with 5 persons in it. You there, if you are the safety, facilities is there, a manager is there, the receptionist is there, the custodian is there, right? So you're meeting, but the company still saying, or at least the perception of culture is that the committee is not really doing anything. So why are they not doing anything? So this is what this slide is saying. What would make the committee then effective, or I guess ineffective? If you twist these points, it's going to make it either effective or ineffective based on how you say it as well, right? So let me just take it from here. So poorly stated objectives and unrealistic targets will make them ineffective, right? So if your case study says that the company has good aims, objectives, and the targets are met, it means the committee is effective. Poor chairmanship. This is a big one. I can talk hours on this one, but I wouldn't, because it's not a kind of exam anymore, right? Poor chairmanship, you can just think of it as if committee chairperson allows everyone then to walk over them, right? If you can't control your meeting, those of us who in meetings, again, you know what I'm talking about, right? If you have poor chairmanship styles, being the chairman of a meeting, yes, you may think it's a nice position, but you have to have some backbone, right? You have to have the backbone to tell a worker who may want to overtake your meeting that this is not the place for that, right? And you may have to talk to that person maybe somewhere on the outside. So if the chairperson doesn't have, I try not to use Trevor Sayers references here, but if the person doesn't have backbone or stamina, then you will find that that persons may overtake their meeting and, you know, sort of overtake what the chairperson was trying to do, right? And those of us in meetings, I'm sure you have seen that happen already. Inconsistent meetings and participants. All of these are reasons why the committee would not be effective. Inconsistent meetings, meaning that you know you're supposed to meet on a Thursday, one day for the month, and you didn't meet for the last 2 months, right? Even participants, the 3 persons that was there last month is not the 3 persons who are here this month, right? So almost as what you did last month, you have to come back and do it over again. Lack of resources, management commitment to fulfill its goals. Again, coming out of the meeting, it may be that you have to train someone, but the company is not giving you the money to train them, or even yet simpler, to purchase PPE. Deviating from the set agenda. This is like the biggest cause of the meeting not being effective, right? I mean, if you're not, like I said, you must have been somewhere in a school where you attended some meeting of something they were doing, some church, temple, mosque meeting. And if you went there and then what you went there for, they didn't talk about that, you probably wouldn't go back. You probably would not go back, because if you took your time to go there and, you know, you were going there to talk about, maybe, I'm just going to make this up, the Christmas event coming up or something, right? And when you get there, they talk about something else, and then you sort of waste your time. You would not go back. So deviating from the agenda is one of the classic reasons why people don't go to these meetings, because they see it as a waste of time, right? A low number of action of items being completed, which is, again, the managers not supporting what the action requirements are. So again, those same committee members may realize that, okay, you know, we are just talking and the managers are not taking the actions we are telling them to take then, right? Inconsistent or a lack of a proper meeting room is actually a good one. I have actually experienced that, where you have a meeting room, but the meeting room has been, you have booked the room, but when you get to the meeting, the CEO is in the meeting room with another client, right? So then what happens to your safety? The message is sent then. What happens to your safety meeting, and what happens to your committee meeting, where the CEO and some clients are in the room, but, you know, you have to, I have had to go and have a meeting under a step, right? So folks, I want to stop here. It's pretty simple, like I said, once you're out of chapter 1. However, though, next week, remember for next week, let me just stop the recording here. Right, so next